Getting more quad sweep in your leg days. Hey everyone, I'm Jewett with J3U University. We elevate physique education. Today I'm going to show you 3 ways to modify some patterns in your squat, your leg press, and your split squat. Put a little bit more bias into your vastus lateralis, also known as that quad sweep. Now, something about quad sweep is, in general, a lot of people just need to build their quad overall. So movements that have just good range of motion and fully at the knee, getting into a good brace position, it's really going to be your big bang movements for building out the overall quad. That doesn't mean that we might be able to preferentially bias the vastus lateralis slightly. But I would say don't do a movement that has so much finesse and getting into an awkward position where it limits the output total as the quad, which would limit your total growth. Now, the first movement we're going to look at is a squat pattern. So with the squat, you have lots of options to pick, but we want to pick something that's going to be very quad biased and within your ability to do. So we could have a front squat, we could have a back squat that's maybe heel elevated or with a safety squat bar. Ideally, we're just trying to get that torso in an upright position so you have a lot of knee travel, not a lot of hip travel back. The more hip travel back that you have, typically that's going to be more glute. The wider your stance goes, you're also going to have more contribution to the adductors. But maybe you need those too. So it goes off back to what do you need development-wise. Now we could also get into some machine patterns would set us up in a position that's well braced and also keeps our torso very upright and favors a lot of knee travel. I'm in the hack squat today because a lot of people probably have a hack squat, but you can do this with in your Smith machine squat as well. My favorite though is a pendulum squat. I just know a lot of people won't have that, but it gives a lot of people the advantage to, even if you have like a taller individual with long femur, to really bias the quad, because the way that pendulum moves is it moves the hip around the knee versus like with a hack squat, you have to drop into a pretty fixed position, which some people might limit their range of motion because they won't have the ankle mobility to get down low. So in your hack squat, setup-wise, for one, we just want a lot of range of motion at the knee. So we also want to target the vastus lateralis, which these fibers run in lines up to the hips. However, there is divisions of the vastus lateralis that kind of run at some angles. And these angles can run into your TFL and also your glute medius. So it ties into this structure up here. So if you go into a wider stance, you might have more preferential bias to the vastus medialis, the intermedius of the quads. Of course, you're going to train the lateralis too. However, as we move this foot and stretch out these fibers of the glute in this IT band, you're also going to put a little bit more stretch into the lateralis, putting some bias into it. So for a more quad sweep bias squat, you want to go as narrow as you can without limiting that knee range of motion. And so what we have with our hack squat, you're going to want your feet as low as you can on the platform until at the bottom, you're realizing your heel is coming up. Now to stay in this really big knee flex position, you could use a heel elevated squat shoe as a way to also stay more quad biased. Now if your heel's coming up, simple thing, just move the feet up a little bit in the platform, and that should be your good balanced foot position to output with. Now, if the stance goes too narrow, what you're going to find is some people are going to run out of hip room, and they might not be in a very deep position. So I'd say find the middle ground. Open up the hips a little bit so you can drop deeper into that squat position. But don't go so wide that we're now starting to target more of the adductor and bring some other musculature into it. So give this a try for getting more quad bias in your squat. You can do this on your hack squat, your pendulum squat, even a Smith squat, but the idea is still going with a more narrow stance with this knees and toes pointing more in the same direction. So moving from our squat pattern, what you might have next in your section would be a leg press. It's moving into a more brace position, something where you can still get really high stimulus without as much fatigue. Now a leg press that I would look for one, just more quad bias in general, would be something like a Cybex leg press, because it moves towards you but also down, which causes a lot of range of motion at the knee. Now, what I also like to do with your leg press is move away from the bilateral pattern, because for some people to get to depth, You're gonna have to open up those hips and get a little bit wider, which could target a little bit more glute, but also more adductor, and bringing that in. So what we can do is go to a unilateral leg press, a single leg press. And that's gonna make this leg, to balance out the weight, come more midline center of the body. And that's gonna put more stretch to this outer part of the musculature instead of having this wide open hip stance. So we're gonna have pretty much our knee in line with the hip, pointing in the same direction of the toes. We wanna get our foot as low on the platform as we can, so we get a lot of knee over toe, a lot of knee travel, but we also don't want in the bottom position, when you push up, that heel to come up and only pushing through the toes. And so we want to make sure we have just our foot as high as we need to, or as low as we need to have even pressure of the heel and the big toe. So give this one a try, set it up. You can do it after your squat pattern to have something very braced and still have a little bit more preferential bias on the quad sweep. Right, so moving from our leg press, one final movement I would consider is a split squat. For one, I think a split squat's a great movement to also have good lateral control of the hips and brace, but also it has so much versatility. If you want to make it glute bias, you want to make it quad bias. So we want to use this movement. I like it towards the end of a session because the way that we're going to set up is heavily lengthened, loaded, which can be great for output after we've already fatigued the quads and our other movement. Now the same thing is going to go if we're trying to bias the quad sweep, is we want something that's also single leg, which is great because we're keeping this knee more inward. You're gonna have some more stretch to this glute area, but also where this lateralis quad sweep ties into this IT band, we can preferentially stretch it a little bit more. So that's why the split squat's a great movement. However, with a normal split squat, both feet on the ground, to get down, we have our dumbbells typically loaded through the shoulder, which is gonna have an even bias of the quad and glute. To get down, right, we're gonna have some knee bend and some hip bend occur. So this is great if you need like overall development of the quad and glute. But how do we make it more quad biased? Well, what we can do is move to a front foot elevation. Now, elevating the front foot, it shifts our weight upright, backwards, right? So now our torso is more upright. We already have some pre-bend in the knee. And what we can cue in this to also make it very quad bias is drive the knee forward. So we can drive the knee forward and our hip and torso staying in the same position versus the other split squat where this hip travels back slightly and has a little bit more bias in the glute. So in this front foot elevation, we're not gonna get the quad fully shortened, but the idea is taking this deep lengthened stretch position. So we're gonna cue this knee to move forward over the toe, get into this deep knee flex position. Our quad is fully lengthened. It's great loading on the quad. And make sure on the bottom here is that you have big toe pressure. It's gonna create a lot of foot stability. Also, it's gonna help bring this knee inward and make sure that we have good alignment and output of the quad. A lot of people wanna shift and have weight shift to the outside of the foot, which starts bringing more adductor in. Also doesn't load the knee as knee friendly as it could be. So we have that good foot brace. How we're gonna get back up is reverse it. So we're gonna push that knee and push ourselves away and back up. Now you're gonna find yourself kind of just staying in this bottom position and loading. Perfectly fine. That's why I think it's a great finishing movement to your quad session. So these are 3 movements you can go through: your squat pattern, your leg press, into your single leg split squat. All of them are gonna build the quad overall, but how we set up could bias maybe just a little bit more to the quad sweep. Some people argue, hey, no matter the knee position, whether it's wide or close, doesn't matter to bias the lateralis, the medialis. And we don't have a lot of data to say that that's true or it's not. However, give it a try and you will absolutely notice there is more pump and more muscle distortion happening to your quad sweep when you set up your movements like this. Leave any comments or questions down below. Jump into our Applied Hypertrophy Optimization course at J3U University if you want to learn more about setting up these exercises. I'll talk to you next time.